Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Josh and I'm going to be your presenter today. We're here to talk about some payroll reports. A couple very important payroll reports. There are lots of them, but these are particularly important. At least I think so. If you're returning, welcome back. If you're attending one of our webinar events for the very first time, we hope that you'll continue to find value in these, and we'll continue to register for them. We're going to work until about 20 minutes after the hour of 3 o'clock Eastern Time here. I will finish up whatever I'm discussing at 20 after, no later, but I'll be happy to stick around and answer questions if I can't get to those during the webinar event. Just a reminder to folks, it's just me here today. There aren't too terribly many folks registered for it, but keep in mind, again, I don't have anybody here answering questions, so it will be me answering your questions as opposed to somebody else on busier webinar events. Again, if you do have a question, type that into the questions portion of the webinar control panel there. I'll try to keep an eye on those and see what I can't do to find a spot to repeat the question and see what we can't do to answer that. We're here to talk about our pay period deductions report in Church Windows Payroll and our history reports. There are lots of reports in payroll, but these are, again, particularly important ones. Hopefully we'll offer some insight on some of those today. Before we get started on this, payroll version 2016 SR1. Hopefully everybody can see my highlighter there. Very helpful for drawing or steering some focus for you. We do record these webinar events, so a recording of this particular event will be available on our YouTube channel between now and the end of this week. So just an FYI, if you were not aware of this, right here, if we go to youtube.com/Church Windows Software, you can find our YouTube channel with all kinds of recordings of these webinar events right here, and we're continuing to add to this every week. After each webinar event, we just put them out there, and they're free. There's no fees or anything for this. You can access this 24/7. So check it out. It's something we keep looking at it, and we want users. We put it out here because we want you to use it. So please do if you're not already doing so. These are all generally the 20-minute webinar events that are broken down by a variety of options. So please use those. They're here for you to use at any time. All right. Where do we find our reports? Well, and of course in payroll, we click on reports, and it reveals a pretty lengthy list of payroll reports. Even some submenus like under electronic filing and tax reports, so there are lots of payroll reports, but we're here today to talk specifically about our pay period deductions report and our history report. So let's look at our pay period deductions report. As with virtually all of the payroll reports, it starts with who do we want to include on our report? Do we want our employees or our employees and contractors or employees and contractors separately, what have you? By default, the system includes all employee types and contractors. So generally we don't have withholdings for contractors, so we might just choose employees. We can even go so far as to select specific employees or contractors if we wish, if we make the appropriate choice. I think for the purposes of our webinar today, we're not going to choose specific employee contractor, but if we do, notice here, you just choose that, and then you've got check boxes down the left. You can click clear all and just check the employees' names who you're wanting, and it'll automatically omit everybody else. But we're going to run it for everybody, for all of our regular employees. There's a reason why we're doing that. When we go to next, it asks us to enter the pay period or the period that we're wanting for the report. It defaults to the most recent pay date that it detects in the system. But in this case, we're going to backdate this to something like January 1 to January 31st. There's a reason why I'm doing that. But basically, you can enter any date range you wish. Once we click Next, it actually reveals the pay period deductions report itself. And there's a few things on here that are very useful. Well, first of all, it does display just deductions and withholdings. I mean, that's what it details. Okay, so, like in this case, deductions. What I mean by deductions are things like, as we see here, pension contributions and insurance, and in most cases, those types of things that employees are having deducted and participating in willingly. But anything that's deducted from their pay, not withholdings, taxes, those are other columns here. We're talking about voluntary withholdings in most cases, not always voluntary. This would also show things like wage garnishments or child support or anything else. So anything that's being deducted from the employee's pay, it's going to show here. So it does also include deductions, but it also does show withholdings for taxes. So if we zoom out a little bit here and we scroll back left, we show our gross pay for the employee, Social Security contributions, Medicare contributions, federal income tax, state, local, and then their gross pay less their tax. Okay? And then a total at the bottom, down here. Total for all of your employees. One of the things that this report is most useful for is right here we notice below our total, which shows our 941 deposit. So right down here we've got 941 deposit of $23.21.38 for the month of January. So if your deposit schedule is monthly, you would run the report for the month that you're wanting to generate your tax total for. You can also generate this total on your 941 form too if you wish, but we can also just generate it on our pay period deductions report. It will show what that deposit total breakdown is. So right here it'll show how much Social Security was deducted, how much Medicare was deducted and matched, and how much federal tax was, what the breakdowns of those are. It does show the singular amount, so how much the employee's contribution was right here under the actual totals, but then it doubles it to show the employer's share added to that. Basically doubling the amount, as it should. Okay? So a couple of other things about this report is our gross pay column on the left is gross regular pay plus allowances. Okay, so, and this is important because when we look at one of our history reports in a little bit, we're going to see a different total on that, but because it breaks the allowances and the regular gross pay down separately. And we'll show you where those two totals are. So gross pay here, just in anticipation of that, is regular base pay plus allowances. Okay? In addition to our withholding amounts and deductions, it does show the amount of each deduction as well as a description, and then what the employee's net pay was for the period. Right here, net pay. Okay? And these figures should add up. What I mean is, you take your gross pay less your tax contributions and withholdings, then less the deductions, should equal the net pay amount on the far right column. And it does. If it doesn't, then we've got a problem and you need to call us about it. Finally, it does also break down it does separate our local taxes here. So right here, while this local tax column, now this is for the whole year that we've got, notice it says local taxes withheld for the year 2016. It's not for the period that we're running the report. This is a very common question. Right up here under local tax is the local tax that's been deducted, in this case for January. If we wanted to run and see what the actual breakdown was for the period, we would have to run our local tax report. Very useful report. When folks want to know what their 941 taxes are for the period, I will frequently use, on my support calls, frequently use this pay period deductions report. Okay? But sometimes this report doesn't offer enough detail. Okay? So this is where maybe some of our other history reports come into play. And notice it does say at the bottom here, all entries have been posted. We're going to go ahead and finish through this report, and we're going to go back into one of our history reports now. Folks are kind of commonly surprised by this, that history report is kind of misleading, because it's not. It's actually 3 reports in this list. So when we click on history report, notice it brings up a menu, a list, and it defaults to the one called payroll history report, but then we've also got employee detail hours report and the federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail. The payroll history report is kind of formatted uniquely, and we're going to look at that one first. So when you choose the history report, go to next. Again, who do we include? We're going to leave it as everybody. Again, it defaults to and from our whole year, but you can enter a specific pay period if you wish, or period or date. Here under our report style, notice at the bottom it does allow us to choose either a group history report or individual. So do we want to see everybody together, or do we want to see separate employees on a separate page? You decide. We're going to leave it as group for the time being. And we're simply going to go to next. So it's kind of similar to our history report. It starts on the left and shows us, what the gross pay amounts were, Social Security, Medicare, federal, state tax. Now this is for all of our employees collectively. What the net tax was for the period, deductions, allowances, etc. And as we continue to scroll right, advanced earned income credit, total net pay, and the 941 amount. A lot of times folks will ask us the question, what is this total here under in bracketed figures under our Medicare, Social Security, federal tax? Well, those are the wages that, based on the pay structure for that period, that would be, say, our Social Security wages for the month of January, or our taxable Box 1 wages. So those totals should check out with either our collective W-2s totals, or for our 941 for each one of those periods. And that's going to change, of course, based on how much pay folks are receiving. So just an FYI, that's what those figures are in brackets underneath each one of these months. Okay? But it does summarize it by quarter, or by month and quarter. So sometimes maybe this report might be more helpful if maybe you run it for an individual history report. So here now, notice, if we maximize it, it shows our Senior Minister Larry, right up here, Employee Larry Higgins, and it shows his breakdown of his pay by month and by quarter. Okay? And so if I go down, using my arrow at the top, it moves on to my next employee, Jimmy Hilliard. Yeah, and right here, it does show right here, I just want to point out the little footer, amounts in parentheses is gross taxable amount for deduction appearing above it. And it says right there, months without payroll history are not shown. Okay? Again, another way of looking at your payroll. I don't use this report too terribly much, but it is very helpful when needed. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. There's not too much flexibility around this, and it doesn't really tell us much. I mean, it does tell us a lot, but it just doesn't show us sometimes the detail we're wanting. This would be the detail by month or by quarter. Okay? Summarized by month or quarter. If we now go back to our reports and history report and choose our employee detail hours report, this report is exactly as described. It is literally a detail of the hours that an employee has worked. or all of our employees collectively. So again, who do I want to include on the report? Again, it defaults to everybody, but I can choose one. Again, I go to next and it defaults to the full year again, but I can choose to enter a specific date or range of dates. And again, I can choose to collectively include everybody on a group history report or run it with individual reports for separate employees. We're going to, again, for the initial purposes of the webinar, we're going to leave it as group history report and go to next. So here, this shows all of our pay dates. Let me zoom in a little bit here. So notice it says January 1 on the left, every pay date with how many hours were entered for all of our employees collectively, how much overtime, additional vacations, time earned, and sick time earned, as well as the actual vacation time earned and used. But again, keep in mind this is for everybody collectively. So one of the questions that folks may be asking themselves is, well, Josh, why do we see vacation earned 720 on January 1 and sick time earned? Because we calculated an adjustment to give and report on everyone's pay stubs how much they've earned or how much they have available for vacation or sick time at the outset of the year. Okay? So if I run this report differently now, so if I go back and I choose individual history report, we're going to see again each one of our employees separated. Again, Larry first with vacation earned of 80 hours or 2 weeks, sick time earned, so a week, and again it shows the breakdown of that. If this were accumulating, meaning if employees were earning their vacation and sick time based on each successive pay date or paycheck they were receiving, we would probably show hours or time periods in each one of these dates. Okay? So as I go now to Jimmy, he again has 80 and 40 for vacation and sick, but then now notice down here down the right-hand side, on his July, some of his July checks, he did take 16 hours of vacation and 8 hours of sick time. And again, it does show his hours down the left-hand side for the amount of hours that he was paid for each one of those pay periods. Whoops, let me get my regular drawing tool back here. And what I mean by that is right here down the left-hand side under regular hours. He's an hourly employee, so it shows how many hours he was paid and a breakdown by quarter and what is his total hours that he's worked throughout the year. Very helpful and useful report. All right, with just a couple minutes left, I want to definitely talk about our final report here, history report. Under our history report of federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail. To me, this is one of the same conventions. Who do we include? What date range do we run it for? And it's either group or individual. I use this report all the time when folks call me and ask me questions about why is my 941 showing a particular figure. So in this case, we're generally going to run this based on a question we have about our 941, whether it's a particular month or deposit period, or in this case, based on a specific quarter. So when I do it, run it as a group history report, it's going to show these totals should match up with, I should be able to match up totals on this with totals that I see on my 941. This breaks down, and we notice here that we've got all kinds of zeros on January 1, and that's my adjustment for on January 1 for my vacation and sick hours. So I'm going to go past those. And it does go down and show, earnings without allowances, taxable allowances, non-taxable deductions, federal compensation or reported wages, how much tax was withheld for my employees, how much Social Security and Medicare, state and local withholding, taxable deductions and non-taxable allowances, and what each net check was and the respective net check amount was in each respective check number, or if they were direct deposit. And where these commonly will occur is when we go down to the last page, is these totals down here under quarter one are the ones that I'm going to be able to more closely match up with my 941. Now again, federal taxable compensation is going to be the total wages for the quarter on my 941. I mean, I don't have to look at it. I know that's what it is because I know this system and I trust it, but yours will too. One final thing about this report will tell us when a change to an allowance or a deduction has occurred mid-year. And here's what I mean. If I say go in here and go, to my deductions file, and I'm going to go ahead and say my health insurance deduction should be included in taxable for reported taxable wages, and click apply and OK, and now I go back to that report and history report. Now notice that I have asterisks on the left-hand column over here. What that says is when I go down to the footnote, indicates a change that has occurred in the federal tax status of a deduction or allowances that is used to calculate and post the payment to the employee file. So that if you ever call me on support and you say, hey Josh, I detect something's changed, I'm going to go in and right here and check this because this is going to tell us, you, me, whomever, whether an allowance or a deduction has changed mid-year. Okay? Won't tell us exactly which one per se, but it tells us that something changed. This is one of the most powerful reports in payroll. All right, I've gone a little bit over, folks. Sorry about that. So if you have questions, I'm done with what I'm talking about. Please type in questions in here. I'll be happy to see what I can do to answer those. If you have to go, by all means, we hope it's been helpful. And again, look for this on our YouTube channel between now and the end of close of business on Friday. All right, I'm just going to sit back here and see if folks start typing in a question to me. If you need to leave or you have to leave the webinar, by all means, choose the File menu on your control panel and choose Exit Leave Webinar. Thank you very much for attending. So again, we hope the webinar has been helpful, and if you have other questions, please call our support staff, or if not, by all means, we hope to see you at another Church Windows User Group webinar. Thank you all so much. Take care. Bye-bye.